Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, everyone, depending on where you might be in the world. My guest today, it's morning time in Perth, Western Australia, and I'm very pleased to welcome Katherine Thomas to the December edition of Law Chat 2022. It's the last one of the year. As usual, brought to you in conjunction with Moore Markhams, accountants and business advisors specializing in financial services for the legal profession. And my guest today is my law consultancy network colleague, Katherine Thomas, who joins me from Perth in Western Australia, where it's just after 9 a.m. Katherine's had a 20-year career in the legal services sector and is probably well known for her work in establishing Vario for Pinsent Masons, a flexible resourcing service. She's now CEO of her own consultancy, Free Range Lawyers, and today she's joining us to talk about human, not resources. Katherine, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Simon. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. You came up with the title. What's the background behind the thinking on that?
Oh, we hear a lot, don't we, about how businesses resource their work. And I feel that we've got to this stage where that term resources and resourcing has become almost interchangeable with people and humans, and it shouldn't be that way, and that's not doing any of us a favor. This concept of resources or resourcing is it's very much about taking, it's very much about utilization. It gives the impression that people are interchangeable and that they're replaceable. But the reality is that every single individual that works for your business is precisely that. They're an individual and they're a human being. And actually, if we're, and I know we'll go on to explore this, during the course of the conversation today, but, if we're actually looking at strategies to develop thriving businesses over the next decade or so, one of the most critical foundations to that is understanding that our people are individuals, they're humans, not resources, and how can we treat them as such?
So just to give some context to this discussion, tell us a little bit more about your work with Free Range Lawyers.
Yeah, sure. So as you said, I've had a long career in the business of law, both in the UK and in Australia. Really fortunate to work with two great organisations, Gowning WLG and Pinsent Masons, and obviously establish Pinsent Masons contract lawyer service in the UK way back in 2012, 2013. Really, when this concept of contract lawyering and flexible lawyering was very new to the market. I moved over to Australia at the end of 2015, and it was around 4 years ago that I established my own flexi resourcing business. And it was really to meet a gap in the market on the supply and the demand side, Simon. So critically on the supply side for those people that we're talking about, those humans, it was to get to the lawyers that either can't or don't want to work in an office. They might live in a very non-traditional location for somebody who's legally qualified. They might not be able to commute to an office, they might not want to do it. And then on the demand side, obviously my background is in working for an international law firm. But I know from running the Vario model how well it works to help law firms meet their clients' needs, but also manage their own costs. And so I really wanted to bring that to a wider group of firms and not just make it the preserve of the large internationals. And so Free Range Lawyers is also very much about serving everybody from those large national firms down to much smaller organisations.
So has there been an uptake in demand for that style of working from employers, particularly since the onset of COVID?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for us, it's funny, when I established Free Range Lawyers, it was really hard in that first year to convince our law firm clients that remote workers could deliver. It was tough. And I remember saying to my colleagues, I'm establishing this business because I know that there will be a change in attitudes towards work. And when there is that change and remote working becomes more normalized, I want to be moving already, rather than setting up now. I mean, like the rest of the world, I didn't really anticipate what happened to us in the first half of 2022. But yeah, for sure, after an initial nervy period, the reality is that demand for legal services absolutely skyrocketed through COVID. And that, combined with the fact that remote working obviously became normalized, and normalized simply through experience, really led to a huge increase in demand from law firms for our lawyers.
So, interestingly, earlier on this year, in the first law chat of this year, we had Nigel Haddon on from the UK, who was talking very much about the war for talent that was going on in Britain, and saying that basically money talks over there, and extravagant figures were being waved in front of potential recruits to move over from one firm to another. Has that been your experience this year in terms of the work that you've been doing?
My experience, just in terms of the pay of the salaries for lawyers.
Do you detect that the war for talent is very much alive in Australasia?
Yeah, it absolutely is. Demand for legal services has just increased. It feels almost exponentially over the last couple of years, Simon. So yeah, definitely that demand's increased. There's, law firms are finding that they just simply don't have the people that they need to do the work that is required of them. So whether we call it a war for talent or something else, yeah, for sure, it is an employees market when it comes to jobs in the legal sector at the moment.
Okay, so I'm interested to ask you, from your experience too, what you consider to have been, the main people stories, if I can call them, over the past 12 to 18 months. I mean, we've had people come on Law Chat talk about Great Resignation, the war for talent, etc., etc. From your perspective, can you summarize what you think the main people stories have been?
Yeah, I mean, I do kind of chuckle at these phrases that we use to put everything into one bucket, whether it's quiet quitting or, the Great Resignation or the war for talent. I mean, you and I, we know that the picture is quite a nuanced one. And there isn't a kind of one size fits all when we're looking at the market. But there are some really clear themes that have emerged over the past few years. I mean, for me, the most important one is the extent to which we've learned that things don't have to be the way that they always were. And I think it's probably quite unspoken, but is a vital component of us moving forward over the next decade. So, the reality is that my experience, Simon, with remote work, 2019, we've got some fabulous people, they can work remotely, they can deliver for you. It really hard sell, and primarily a hard sell because, even though the law firms got the concept intellectually, they didn't get it emotionally. They hadn't actually experienced remote work themselves. You come over to 2020, everybody's working remotely, and there's that experiential difference, and attitudes changed because people had actually experienced remote working in their day-to-day lives. So I think the first thing is we've realized that we can change things can change quickly, and it doesn't have to be the way it always was. I've I love my books, but this is one of my favorites. Let me get it. Can I get it closer to the screen?
Yeah,
anyway,
it doesn't like the background.
It doesn't, does it? Here we go.
There you go. That's better. Hold it in front of you.
At Work, A History of How We Spend Our Time, which is like a combination of my two favorite topics. But
who's the author?
It's James Sussman. There he is.
Can't hold it up a bit. Just I can't see the title. Is his name at the bottom of it?
The author, James Sussman. Yeah. Suzman.
Thank you.
So a history of how we spend our time. And so it's fascinating because I'm a history graduate and I'm obviously heavily involved in work and the concept of work. You know, and this notion, you know, that we all really internalize, which is the way that work looks now is the way that work almost has always looked, or certainly needs to look in the future, you know, and taking that kind of historian's perspective, and realizing that things do change, and they do change over time, and you know, the foundations on which we're basing our lives and our assumptions aren't necessarily going to be there in 5, 10, 15, 100 years time. I think is a really important point. So, you know, first point is I think COVID's taught us that there's no going back from that, and I think that that's a wonderful thing that's come out of a terrible situation. You know, secondly, and linked to that, and it's such an obvious point, but you know, that another big story is, you know, where and how we work, and we can't ignore that. You know, whole swathes of people now working away from the office, not commuting, working more from home, and lives and lifestyles then changing as they wrap around that. And then for me, I think the last sort of important story or interesting trend, which we've only seen the start of at the moment, is what I'd call kind of purpose gets teeth. So, you know, we've been talking a lot about purpose and the concept of purpose for an awfully long time, you know, in the business management world, but it's quite nebulous, right? You know, it's quite difficult to grab hold of. And it's especially difficult when you're talking to busy leaders, you know, of law firms and corporates, and you know, they've got a whole pile of stuff that they need to do on their desk, and then you're telling them that, you know, they need to have a really clear underlying purpose for their organization. In order to get that, you know, it requires an awful lot of thinking and discussion and thinking differently. So it's always been quite a challenge, I think, to align purpose to a capitalist system and a kind of corporate system. But definitely over the last couple of years, what I'm seeing is it's getting teeth in the form of ESG. So, you know, we're becoming far more specific about what we mean by purpose in organizations, and whether that's the whole lot, or whether it's, you know, some organizations are aligning themselves more with the E or the S, or the just the more governance sort of trust side of things. You know, time will tell where the legal sector sort of falls on that. But I do get a sense that we're really at the start of a journey where we're getting far more specificity around what we mean about purpose.
And when you talk about ESG, that's environmental, social, and governance.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Very interesting. So you've got these three kind of stories from this year. I'm interested to know what you think, what impact that may have had on the expectations of employees, because quite often our discussions are focused on what does this mean for employers, but
yeah, sure.
I suppose just flipping the coin for a minute in terms of people looking for jobs and looking for work, you say it's an employees market effectively. Do you think their expectations are overly inflated, or do you think they feel they've got more bargaining power?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I kick off with an obvious point, but it's worth making, which is, you know, we all like to create themes and trends, but the reality is it's a hugely nuanced picture. And going back to what we talked about right at the start, you know, there are as many views on work and the workplace as there are humans within it, right? Yeah. However, you know, what makes discussions like this really interesting is kind of identification of themes. So, you know, I will do that. It's definitely an employees market, you know, compared to where we were 3 or so years ago. But you know, that's a phrase that we use quite glibly, but what do we mean by it? That's manifesting itself in a whole host of different ways, you know, depending on the individuals. So number one, and we might come to this in a moment, inflated salary expectations. It's just a natural consequence of the law of supply and demand, right? It's just going to happen. So but not everybody is out there leveraging this situation purely in order to get more money. So So, what we're also seeing is people looking to create a style of working that suits them better, that suits their family, community, mental health, physical health requirements in a far better way than previously. We're also, I think, seeing people looking for coming back to that purpose word, roles that have a purpose to them that is more aligned to their values. And they're using this opportunity of an employees market to shop around and find an organization that gives them that kind of alignment. So yeah, I mean, I need to get onto it really, because I wanted to write a short blog post on this. Essentially, I think what we're seeing is the consumerization of employment, attitudes towards employment from those humans that we talked about before. In the consumer world now, we're really familiar with individual treatment, personalization. We expect to have our experience personalized to us. And I feel in the employment market, that's very much what we're seeing the start of as well. Our employees are expecting to have an experience and a style of work that suits them individually.
So let's flip the coin back over again, and imagine, I'm a managing partner of a firm. I'm scratching my head because I can see the market has changed, and my firm might be vulnerable to defections or people who've decided to go out on their own, or they get lured by a competitor who's waving a big checkbook around. Not that checkbooks exist anymore, but you know what I mean. So in practical terms, are there any suggestions that you can give employers tuning into this in terms of what they should be doing, whether it's A, in terms of recruitment, or B, in terms of retention?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, I'd say don't ignore salary. A decent salary is table stakes. You get what you deserve in terms of how you approach the way you reward your people. So don't be afraid to admit that the market has changed and that there is a need to change your own approach to what you pay your people. So I think, we've not quite seen it in the same way here in Australasia as we have over in the UK, but, still sort of salaries at corporate type law firms have gone up about 10%, over the last sort of year or 18 months or so. So, but that's table stakes, right? And that is a very short term lever to use to attract and retain people. But just, don't forget it at the expense of all the other stuff. But I think really going back to what I was talking about before in terms of what employees are looking for, it's actually looking at how your organization can meet those needs. Now, I actually think that, we need to celebrate the diversity that we have in terms of law firms and corporate employers of lawyers here in Australia and New Zealand, and not expect there to be one solution, one size fits all. I think the critical thing is clarity, being really, really clear about what you stand for, because then you attract the people that you want and need. It's that kind of good to great, getting the right people. It's not getting people on the bus, it's getting the right people on the bus. So do you know what? If you are a corporate law firm that is all about doing top of market deals, sort of very little lifestyle, but a hell of a lot of quality work, and high salaries and high expectations of what your people will input into your organization, then do you know what? I say go for it, right? And be clear about that. Because you will attract the people that are looking to work in that way. And then similarly, and I think that probably the majority, certainly of law firms, would fall into this latter camp. If that isn't the entirety of what you're all about, understand what it is that you are all about, and then don't be afraid to articulate it and be really clear about it. Certainly here in Australia, there's some fantastic businesses like Legal Light or Hive, my friends at Hive Legal, CIE Legal, who are unashamedly saying we're different to the big players and we offer something different. And here is what it is. And come to us if that is what you value.
Yeah.
So I think it's that knowing who you are and then being unashamedly clear about it in the market.
And not pushing it with, if I can say, bullshit. I mean, recently, as you know, I was researching for my soon-to-be published book, and one of my interviewees there in Britain talked about, the trend of greenwashing in some businesses in the UK. In other words, we pretend that we've got an ESG agenda or sustainability agenda driving our firm, but is it anything more than vacuous PR? And I guess the lesson here is that, you've got to be sincere, I guess, in your approach and message to the market.
Yeah, the market has become more sophisticated at weeding that out. That's for sure. And that, there has to be an alignment between what you tell the market that you're about and what you actually live and breathe day to day. And in a kind of employment or kind of worker sense, a really good example of that is, a lot of these larger organizations will have really fabulous sets of values, amazing flexible working policies that attract people in on that basis. But then when they get in, they realize that, but I'm actually working for, I'm not picking on property, but I'll do it for now. I'm actually working for the property team. And the partners that lead the property team just don't operate in that way at all. And so this sort of occurs in multiple dimensions. There's the pure disconnect between what you say and what your organization's about. But then there are other traps that the organizations can fall into, which very genuine businesses can fall into, which is the espoused values versus actually what happens in individual teams on the ground.
Yeah.
And certainly I'm hearing an awful lot from people who are moving and shifting at the moment. And we all know that there's a huge amount of movement in the market still. One of the big reasons that people are staying in roles for a short amount of time is what they were sold is not what they were given. And they might even recognize that parts of the business give it, but the part of the business that they're in doesn't. And so how do you have that running through a business? How do you have those values that you espouse running through a business like, words through a stick of rock?
The leadership challenge.
Yeah, absolutely, Simon. Interested to hear more about it when your book's out.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. I want to take this a little bit further too, because obviously there are implications, I think positive implications for mental health. It's been obviously well documented ever since I wrote my first book back in 2000, when I highlighted statistics about the high levels of depression in the profession. And since then, we've had survey after survey done globally and in different jurisdictions about the state of mental health in the legal services sector, and it doesn't make pretty reading. But I'm just wondering, I haven't read a survey in the last couple of years anyway, but I'm just wondering whether COVID has actually been beneficial to mental health. There's probably two sides to that argument, but what I'm getting at is the fact that if they are able to either work 4-day weeks or work more from home, whether that's had an unintentionally positive impact on people. What's your take on it?
Gosh, I mean, it's introduced mental health challenges, and it's introduced some mental health challenges and eased others. So, on the positive side, I think that number one, we're talking about it a lot more, and the concept of focusing on the health of what goes on in your mind is just far more normalized, right? And that just absolutely has to be a good thing. So yeah, we've normalized those discussions. People who are having mental health challenges, I think, generally speaking, aren't seen as the outliers that they were, certainly when I started my career. So that's a huge positive. I think another positive is, and back to this point around sort of consumerization or individualized approaches to employment, people, those human beings do, generally speaking, have more agency about how they structure their working day, in order to help manage their mental health. And, it's one of the things I've talked a lot about in Free Range Lawyers right from the start is, one of the huge benefits of remote work is just it enables you to put the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle together in a way that suits you. And, so if going for a run in the middle of the day, sort of helps you manage your mind, you can do that. If actually having dinner with your family is really important to your mental health, you can do that. There's a degree of flexibility. So I think for sure, we're seeing all of that. I guess what's disappointing is we're not seeing any let up on the root causes of poor mental health. So, all of those surveys that you and I have read, essentially, one of the most critical reasons for poor mental health is overwork. It's exhaustion, and hence why I entitled this, Humans Not Resources, because we have to remember that we are animals. And we are animals with certain physical needs, food and water. And here's fun, we actually need sleep. And most people actually need quite a lot of sleep and rest in order to be able to function. And for sure, like really short bursts of intense activity, most people can cope with and can be part of a really kind of interesting and exhilarating work life. But the reality is, if somebody is sleep deprived over a long period of time, they are not going to perform at their best, and their mental health will suffer. And what I'm seeing, generally speaking, out there in the market is that we've still got this attitude in law around sweating the assets. So we'll say the right thing out there in the market, and actually, do you know what? We'll also enable people to design their working lives a bit more. But we're still going to require them to put 70 hours a week in. So you can go for a run in the middle of the day, like fill your boots and go and do that. But you still need to be working at 9 or 10 p.m. When the partner clicks their fingers and asks you to jump, you have to say how high. I'm not really seeing a shift in the fundamental building blocks of how law firms organize their work, and how they organize their finances, how they make money. It's still about putting those people to work, and when there is a peak in demand, it's putting those people to work more.
Interestingly, this morning, I see in the Lawyer magazine, it came online that Travers Smith, it's reported in the UK, are now insisting that their staff spend 60% of the working week in the office.
Yeah. It's I've seen that quite a lot here in Australia, and certainly, for my friends, here in Perth, just working here in Australia, an awful lot of organisations, mandating a certain number of days in the office. It's interesting.
Okay, so we've got a minute left. I imagine that you're in an elevator with a law firm leader. All right. What key messages would you like him or her to know about people in the law as 2022 draws to a close?
All right. Three things. Reminding him or her that your people are humans. They're not resources. No one size fits all. We have particular needs, and we need to treat those our people as individuals and bring humanity into the law. I think, secondly, as we look ahead, agility is going to become even more important. So we've proven that we can do it. We've proven that we can change, and we can be agile. How are we going to build on this over the next decade? And then my last point would be to really ask them to think about purpose, and as I say, purpose getting teeth. and what the purpose of their organisation is and how they're going to communicate that to their employee audience.
Wonderful stuff. Hey, look, well, thank you very much for joining us today, and with those tips, and hopefully leaders who are tuning into this either today or in the future will get a lot of benefit from your insights. So thank you for sharing those. And this is the last Law Chat of 2022. For those of you who've enjoyed my chat with Katherine today and are interested to listen to or watch other Law Chats, just go to my website, simontupman.com, and go to the resources page, and you'll find the library of previous Law Chats listed at the bottom of the page, and hosted on YouTube. So just click and watch. They're all free. And this one will also be loaded onto YouTube in the next few days. So all that remains for me is to say, Katherine, thank you for coming on today. I wish you all the best for the holidays. Don't get overboiled down there in Perth. You'll make all our English friends too jealous.
No, I'm getting back to the UK, so I will be suitably cold.
Wrap up warm. Well, I'm staying firmly in New Zealand, but to all the other viewers who've joined us today, thank you for joining us on Law Chat today and earlier this year, and I wish you all the best for Christmas and the New Year, and we will be back in February with a new edition of Law Chat. But until then, all the best to everybody, and Katherine, take care. We'll see you soon.
Bye, Simon.
Bye-bye.